Again to this next edition, this October edition of Church Facility Management Solutions webinar for proactive event planning. The fact that you're here helps us because now you know it's good to be proactive. You signed up and you did something ahead of time. That is awesome. I am Nathan Parr, obviously facility specialist with Cool Solutions Group. And with us today is Deborah Ike, and she is our subject matter expert when it comes to not only event planning, but several other things. So, Deborah, would you please just go ahead and take a few moments, kind of introduce yourself to our folks and tell us a little bit about what you do and all the different things that you're a part of.
Sure. Thank you very much. So again, my name is Deborah Ike. I run a business called Velocity Ministry Management, where my background is kind of an interesting combination of a lot of time spent in the corporate world, but then a lot of time also spent volunteering and serving in ministry on staff. And so what I have done is combined what I like to refer to as my heart for ministry and my head for business into serving the church, helping particularly those in a church administration or executive pastor type role with all of the stuff that's behind the scenes support function to make ministry possible week in and week out at your church. And so that comes in a couple different subject matter areas where I have some expertise in. One is in regards to church event planning and project management, volunteer management, and then also risk management. And so that's what I address on my website. I've self-published a few books on those topics as well, and teach a few courses and do some consulting along those lines. So that's where I come from on all of this, and just really have a heart for the church and serving those who make all of the stuff behind the scenes happen so that Sunday services and various events go off without a hitch and you're able to truly focus on ministry.
Outstanding. Excellent. So, folks, I hope you are ready today. We have made available as a PDF the handout. On your handouts on your control panel, you'll see the slides that we're going to go through. As normal, if you have questions as we're going along in that control panel, go ahead and shoot the questions through the control pane. We'll be working those in as we get them, and we will have a time at the end for some question and answers as well. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and throw up our PowerPoint, and we will start this going. So thank you all, and Deborah, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. So obviously today we're talking about proactive event planning, trying to make the whole process of hosting events at your church smoother, easier, less stressful, less, sleeping practically at the church the week before the event, trying to pull all this stuff off, right? So talking about, or go back in your head and think about the last big event that you hosted at your church. This time of year, it's in October, the last big event might have been a big back to school outreach, or maybe launching small groups after everyone's gotten back from summer break. And so I want you to go back and think about how that went this year. And I want to ask you a few questions of, maybe what sounds familiar here out of this list. So were you spending some late nights at the church the week or two before the event, just trying to get all the last minute stuff done, make sure that the event was successful? Did anyone really know who was in charge of that particular event? So who got to make final decisions on graphics, on the worship set, on logo and design, if you're going to charge for the event or not, all that kind of stuff. Who was that one person that everyone knew they could go to for direction? Did you have to pay extra to some vendors for a rush job? So maybe it was print materials or volunteer t-shirts, stuff like that maybe you either had to pay for rushed shipping or just for them to put your work at the start of the line simply because you kind of got stuff to them a little bit late. From the staff perspective and your volunteers, was there just some tension and frustration a couple of weeks before the event, just maybe due to lack of communication, clear direction for the volunteers? And then finally, did you just not have enough volunteers at all? These are things that I see happen quite a bit in churches as you're starting to prepare for a big event. So if you've experienced one or all of these, first off, you're not alone. And second of all, it can be fixed. Okay. So let's talk about what causes this to happen. As I've worked with different churches, here's some of the big reasons why I've seen these problems rise to the top. One is there's not a named leader for the event. So there's not one person who is coordinating all the tasks, all of the individuals that are responsible for various parts of the event. You know, maybe one department doesn't know what the other department is working on, and they need to coordinate to be effective. If you don't have, let's say, a conductor for your orchestra, if you will, you're going to get off beat at some point. You're going to have different groups in the orchestra playing at the wrong time, at the wrong tempo. Okay, so you need somebody that's really providing that central direction, make sure everyone's on the same page and everyone's getting their stuff done on time, and letting the next department know, hey, we're done with this part, so you can start with your segment of it.
Okay. Can I ask you a quick question?
Cause for problems is expectations just aren't set and communicated from the very beginning. So if you don't know exactly why your church is doing this event, or who you're trying to serve, who are you trying to reach within your community, what are some of the key goals that you have? Is it to hand out a certain number of backpacks of school supplies, a number of Thanksgiving dinners? Do you want to reach X number of couples within your church and to help them with their marriages, stuff like that? What are the key goals for this particular event? And this applies even if your church has done this event 10, 20 years in a row. You still need to know exactly why we're doing this and make sure everyone on the team knows that, so that they can make those decisions through that filter. Okay, another thing that happens is events are just planned at the last minute. And really what I've seen happen most is churches get into kind of a vicious cycle. And so, if you're scurrying around trying to get all the details finished for an event that's next weekend, it's really hard to even wrap your brain around an event that's happening in 3 months, to really get out in front of the game and start being proactive in your planning, right? So if you're constantly in last minute fire drill mode, it's hard to break out of that cycle. It's definitely possible, but that's something that I see happen a lot is a church will just say, well, I can't start on that because we're trying to plan for 2 weeks from now, much less 6 months from now, right? So that's something that it really does take some effort to breast out of that cycle, but it's absolutely worth it. And then finally, another cause is there's just not a standard structured process for planning events. So what typically happens is somebody will kind of sort of be put in charge of the event, and they host a bunch of meetings, and there's not detailed action items that come out of that each meeting. There's no follow-up with whoever said, hey, I'll do this part or I'll do that. And there's no real communication from one department to the next. So when there's not a standard process that you use for every single event, regardless of the size, regardless of the department that's hosting it, it becomes kind of a free-for-all. And miscommunications happen, or just a flat out lack of communication happens, and you end up with kind of that last minute scramble. Excuse me, I'm still getting over a cold. So finally, let's talk about, enough about what's wrong and why that happens. Let's talk about how to fix it, right? That's why we're all here. So my number one recommendation is to implement a process that every staff member, every key volunteer is going to use to plan every single event at your church. And here's what this does for you. One, it gets everyone on the same page so that everyone knows, okay, here's how we're going to plan this event. Here's, who I need to go to for key decisions. Here's who's going to help coordinate all the tasks. Here's how we're going to do this. And it streamlines every event after that first one where you implement this process, because everyone kind of gets used to doing things this way, and they realize, okay, we're kicking off the first team meeting for this particular event, I know I'm going to get some information about why we're doing this event, our goals, some of the key decisions that have already been made, such as budget or timing, or if we're going to charge for the event, the theme of the event, all that kind of stuff. And so everyone kind of gets used to, this is how we're going to do this, and it's easier to get into a rhythm and to know what to expect and to be able to streamline that process, and it becomes more and more efficient and effective as you move forward. And my second key recommendation here is to either appoint someone who's already on your staff or to hire someone who their full-time job is to plan events at your church. Now, before you tell me, hey, we can't afford to do that, I absolutely understand that. What I've seen some churches do, if they do have a ton of events and they're a bigger church, some of them will actually hire someone that their full-time job is to coordinate all the events at their church, and that makes sense for them. In other cases, they may take somebody who is already really detail-oriented, who's already really great at to-do lists and coordinating efforts between departments and all that kind of stuff. They'll take somebody with those types of skill sets and say, okay, 25% or 50% of your job is now coordinating events for our church. And so I know it's not always possible to make that someone's full-time gig, but when you have somebody who is the event planner, and when I say event planner, here's what I'm talking about. This is your conductor for your orchestra. This is the person who talks with each person who's going to be involved in the planning and the execution of the event to make sure they know here's all the tasks that have to be completed by these dates, by these individuals to pull this thing off and to be successful. This is the person who pulls together various team members when they need to troubleshoot an issue that's popped up. This is the person who makes sure that the communications department hears from the department that's hosting the event and sponsoring it to know here's what the theme is, here's kind of the color and the decor scheme that we're looking at doing, and so that the communications department then knows here's how, here's what I can start developing as options for the logo and the website design and such. Okay, so this person is really that coordinator for everyone on the team to go to know, okay, if I have a question, if I'm not sure what is next, if I'm having problems getting answers from another department, I go to that event planner and they'll help me troubleshoot that issue. Okay.
Okay.
So what does this process look like? Let's go to that next. This is a process that I've developed based off of my experience in the corporate world as a project manager and my experience working with churches on planning their events. And I've used this process for events from roughly 1,200 ladies at a brunch all the way to nearly 10,000 people at an outdoor outreach event. Okay, so this same process can scale up or down based on the size, the scale, and the scope of your event. Okay, and so I'm going to highlight each step of this process through the rest of the presentation. So first off, clarifying the vision. I alluded to this earlier, but this is really defining the purpose of the event. And I'm even talking about Christmas and Easter. Okay, we all know that we're going to do something, whether it's a bigger service or, it's something special at the service or a whole new production. We're going to do something special for those holidays, right? We know that. And anyone, involved in the church world for any period of time is probably going to go, well, of course we're going to do that. And why are we doing it? Well, we're the church. We do that. Okay, absolutely. I don't disagree with any of that. But you still need to think through, who are we trying to reach through our Christmas service? If you're doing a big Christmas pageant, if you've got the kids, from the children's church coming in to do something special, or whatever it is, why are we doing this? Who are we trying to reach or serve? How is this event or this aspect of our Christmas service, how does that support the overall vision and mission of our church? So you can take that from Christmas, Easter, a marriage retreat, a men's breakfast, ladies brunch, any kind of event that you're doing at your church. asking these questions and documenting the answers and distributing that information to anyone who is involved in planning the event. Because the answers to these questions are going to be the filter for every single decision that you will make about the event. From, are you going to charge for the event or not? Are you going to provide childcare? What's the theme of the event? What should the logo and graphics look like? What should the decor and the room setup feel like and look like? All of those decisions are going to be filtered through the answers to these questions. So this is a key first step that you need to take to planning your event. And it's one that's very tempting to skip because it's one that we all kind of think, oh, well, yeah, duh, we know why we're doing this event. Right. Just take 5 minutes and document it and then review it with everyone on the team. And you might be surprised that you're going to get a few questions of, well, I thought the event was about this. Okay. Just making sure everyone's on the same page will save you a lot of heartache and frustration down the road.
And making sure it's documented and then shared.
Oh, Nathan?
Yeah, I was just saying, and I just wanted to add that I love that you said document and then share it and then remind them, because we all have that tendency. We think we know, like you said, and we don't write things down. But if we write it down, we have something to refer back to. Even if we're not there, someone can go back and say, if one of your team members leaves during the planning process, we have something to refer back to. So thank you for sharing that part of it.
Oh, absolutely. And this is something where, if you're in a team meeting and there's a big decision that you have to make about the event, maybe a problem has come up or something changed or what have you, you pull this back out and go, okay, how does this information help us decide, help us make this key decision on maybe what guest speaker to invite or what songs to sing in the worship, or what the order of the service, all that kind of stuff. You bring that out on a consistent basis to remind yourself, remind the whole team, oh yeah, okay, this is the direction we're all headed in. Okay.
And a question came up when submitted of, do you have a preferred way to distribute this information? Do you do it in email? Do you create a shareable document? What would you recommend?
What I recommend is, first off, and I'll get into more detail on this part later, but to have a centralized task management system. So a Basecamp, Asana, Trello, those are kind of the big ones that come to mind. And you would create a project in that system for this particular event, and that would be a key document that you would put in that project set of folders. Another thing that you would do is at your team kickoff meeting, you bring this out. It's a handout that you distribute to everyone and you review during the meeting. Some people are auditory learners, so they learn by hearing. Some people are more visual, and so you want to kind of capture all those different ways of consuming and really absorbing information. So there's no one way to distribute it. I would actually go for multiple approaches.
Okay, great.
Good question, though. So the next step in the process is to create your project plan. And if you've never developed a project plan, really just think of it as a sophisticated to-do list. Okay, so everyone's created, even if it's just writing a few notes on a Post-it note of the things you need to get done that day, everyone's created a to-do list, right? So for a project plan, that list is going to include the name of the task. So what do we have to do? Who is assigned to actually complete that task? The deadline, and then any dependencies. So when I'm creating a plan for an event, the first thing I do is I go old school and I get out a really big sheet of paper, or I use my whiteboard and I sketch out the high level timeline. So if this event is 6 months out, I'll put the next 6 months across the top as columns, and down the left side, I'm going to put sections of the event. So marketing would be one row. If we're providing childcare, that would be a section. Security would be a section. Facilities would be a section. Finance would have its own row, etc. Okay, so I'm going to create just kind of a high-level timeline and fill in some of the really big tasks that are going to be necessary in each month. This just gets me kind of that 30,000-foot view to think through, okay, what do we need to do and when? So a quick example would be, we need to settle in on the theme for this event. And if we're going to have a guest speaker, we need to get that nailed down first, right? So that's a big task that has to happen early on. Not too far after that is creating some promotional materials for the event. So whether that's a video, it's a page on your church website, it's the logo and graphics for the event, it's a registration page, social media posts, all that kind of stuff. So I'll think through all of that and develop an outline of the project plan. And I'll either outline that. I personally like to use Asana, but you can use Basecamp, you can use an Excel spreadsheet to get started if it's a smaller one. But you can get started creating that outline of the plan. And then under each section, so like marketing would be a section, right? Under each section, you would fill in the tasks that you think are needed within that area. So if we go to facilities, you might have reserve the worship center or the main sanctuary. Make sure that HVAC is programmed correctly for the day and what hours that you need it for that event. Get information on how many tables and chairs in the room setup we need. Schedule janitorial services for the day before and the day after the event, stuff like that. And so you go ahead and you fill out each section of the project plan. Then you want to take all those tasks, all that information to each team member. So for facilities, the event planner would take that list to the facilities manager, the head of the facilities department, and say, okay, here's what I think your group or you're going to need to do to support this particular event. Is there anything we need to add or change based on your experience? Do the deadlines make sense based on when we're hosting the event? Do the assignments make sense? Do I have the right person assigned to each task? And so the event planner is going to go to each department. So facilities, finance, communications, maybe the worship leader, all those areas to make sure we've got all the tasks on this project plan. Now, take a time out here for a second. The reason that we go to all this effort to put all these tasks in a centralized system or on an Excel spreadsheet, whatever works for you, is so that we think it all the way through before we just start running around trying to complete tasks. So if you were getting ready to go on a road trip from California to New York, you wouldn't just get in your car and start driving east, right? You would actually probably fire up your GPS, maybe go online, check out the best routes, find some cool places to stop along the way, make sure that your car is prepped, all of that kind of stuff, right? Same concept for pulling off an event. You don't want to start running around and just heading towards event day without giving some careful thought and proactive planning to how you're actually going to get to event day successfully. Okay, so that's the whole purpose of developing this plan. It's developing your roadmap from point A to point B. Okay, so once you've talked with each team member, you're going to go back into the plan, make those changes, update some task dependencies. So a task dependency is, for example, from a facilities perspective, you can't schedule people to come in and set up all the tables and chairs or arrange to rent additional tables and chairs if necessary until you know the day of the event and how many people they expect to have and how they want the room to be set up. Okay, so that task, your task of coordinating that setup, is dependent on getting that information from probably the department that's hosting the event. Okay, so that's what I mean by a task dependency.
Okay.
Once you get all that updated, then you would go back to each team member, the event planner would, and just review those tasks with each team member, get their agreement on the tasks, the deadlines, the assignments, and dependencies. And why you go back to them to get their sign off and get their agreement on it is key. I've made the mistake of not doing this before. When I worked in my corporate job, I took the word of a consultant we had, and he told me this is what he thought the tasks were and when they should be done, all that kind of stuff. And the people that would actually be doing the work, they kept putting me off when I was trying to schedule meetings with them to talk to him about it. So I just said, okay, fine. I'll take this guy's word for it and we'll put in the plan. That was my mistake, because we got into a big team meeting and I asked why they were behind on some of these tasks. They got really upset with me, and rightly so, because I hadn't talked to them first about the deadlines. Okay, so you want to go and you get buy-in from each member of the team that, yep, these are the tasks that I should be responsible for, and here's how long it will take me to get each one done, and get them to kind of shake hands, sign off on it. Okay.
All right. So they agree to do the job that needs to be done when it needs to be done.
Yes.
Without anybody being in the dark. So it's all about open communication.
Yeah, and really they're the ones telling you, even if as the event planner, if you went ahead and did a first draft of the plan, to take that to them, because it's always easier for somebody to add to or change something than to start from a blank sheet of paper. Excuse me. So if you come to them with a draft and they're able to put their stamp on it and change it and make some adjustments, then they've bought into it. They've said, yep, this is what needs to happen and when, and I'm agreeing that I'm responsible for these things. So it just makes life a lot easier later on when there's the inevitable issue pops up or somebody's running behind on a task. You're holding them accountable to something that they already committed to doing versus holding them accountable to something that you told them to do.
Right.
Doesn't sound like a big difference, but it makes a big shift.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the beauty of being proactive and looking ahead of time for this process, because they may know what other events or other things are happening that they need to coordinate around. And that just helps avoid those pitfalls.
Yeah, and especially, from the facilities perspective, finance, the communications or media team, they're never working on one event at a time, right? So you're working on Sunday services, maybe a Wednesday night service. There's other departments that are hosting events. There's another church-wide event coming up in a few months, all that kind of stuff. So they're never dealing with one at a time. And so when you go to them and say, hey, we've got this event coming up in 6 months, we want to make sure we go ahead and get on your calendar. Here's what I think is needed that your department is going to be responsible for this event. When is it going to make sense for you to work on this based on everything else you have going on? When you're having that conversation 6 months before the event, that's a good place to be in, because you can fit it in around the other stuff that they're already working on, and they're going to be able to give you a better product in the end anyway, because they're not rushed. Okay, so it just works better for everybody. And then the last bullet here, Nathan, if you'll go forward a couple here. The last point on developing the plan is to go ahead and put all those tasks into a centralized management system, such as Basecamp, Asana, Trello. I think there's another one out there called Monday. There's a bunch of different systems out there that you can use, but what makes it, why I recommend doing this, is it gives everyone on the team a chance to go into that system. They can see what tasks they have coming up. So let's say over the next 2 to 3 weeks, they can go in there and update the status of that task. So either mark it as complete or say, yep, I've got this in progress and here's who I'm working with. And they can save files and attach the file to a particular task. If they've created 2 or 3 different graphics options and then they need somebody to review that and approve it and select which one they want, you can do all that communication within that centralized task management system. And the bonus of that is it can really cut down on the number of meetings that you have to have, which everyone would like a little bit more time to actually do work versus meeting about work. Okay.
Absolutely.
So that's something that can make everyone's life a little bit easier.
Okay.
So next up, once you have this plan put together, you really need to get the team together. Now you've already started talking with folks because you needed their input for the plan, but you need to actually get them in a room at some point to kick off this event planning process and move forward. So the first thing is you kind of need to decide what roles you need to fill. So for instance, some events you're going to provide childcare for, and some events you might not. So you may or may not need a representative from that ministry area on your team. Sometimes you're going to need more involvement from the worship leader than other events, right? So you need to just make sure you know who do we need on this team. So representatives from which areas, which ministry areas, which departments, and then assign an individual to fulfill each role. That might be the head of that department or somebody that person delegates it to. And then I would provide an actual, again, written job description for each role on the team. Now, before you kind of freak out on me and say, I don't even have a job description for my role, much less for a role in an event planning team, hear me out. I'm talking like 2 or 3 bullet points here. And actually, this is something that I've created templates for and sample job descriptions for that come along with my book, the Church Event Planning Toolkit. So if you end up buying that book, you send a request in, and I send you all the templates that come with the book. And this is one of those, is a job description for pretty much every role that you would have on a team, on an event planning team. So that's a big shortcut for you. The purpose of having a written job description is just to make sure everyone knows what lane they're in. Okay, here's what you're responsible for. Here's what you're not responsible for because somebody else has that. Stuff like that. It's just, again, it's providing clarity. It's making sure everyone's on the same page. They know what their role is and what they need to be doing. Okay. And then the last part of assembling the team is to facilitate a team kickoff meeting. And this is something that can be probably 30 minutes max. And it's, you go over the vision and the goals for the event that we talked about earlier. You kind of present maybe an org chart for the event team. So who's on the team, what role is each person fulfilling. Everyone's going to have their job description. You might provide a high-level timeline for the event. So, this event is in 6 months. Here's kind of the high level of the big tasks that we're going to focus on each month, stuff like that. Just, again, it gets everyone on the same page. We're starting off together. You know who's responsible for what.
Got it.
Next part of the process is the part that takes the longest. This is actually executing the plan. So you did all this work to figure out all the tasks that we need to do, and you got it all written down, or you got it on this task management system, and now you actually have to go do that stuff, right?
Right.
So throughout this part of the process, the event planner's role is really facilitating communication and keeping everyone moving in the right direction at the right time. So, as an event planner, project manager, what I've done is just looked ahead 2 to 3 weeks at the plan to see who has something due within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And then I would go and communicate with that person and just say, hey, Joe, you've got this task due in 2 weeks. Do you see any roadblocks or any potential issues to getting that done on time? Nope. Great. Okay. Let me know how it goes. Please update it in Basecamp when you're done. We're good. Or, oh, okay, there's something else that popped up that you got assigned to do. Let's talk about how we can kind of facilitate this and still get everything done on time. Okay, and kind of help troubleshoot. Or you haven't received the information you needed from this other department to start your work so you can finish it on time. Let's go talk to them and figure out what the holdup is and get that roadblock moved. Okay, so that's really the event planner's role, is to make sure everyone knows what's coming up next. Again, because everyone on the team probably has 2 or 3 other things they're working on. Other events, regular services, week in and week out. This is not their only gig. This is not their only set of tasks. And so the event planner's role is to just make sure everyone's staying on target. The other big part of the event planner's role here is to coordinate and lead team meetings as needed. I'm always an advocate for, if you don't need a meeting, don't schedule one. And if you do need a meeting, you need to have an agenda. So exactly what do we need to accomplish through this meeting? Figure out exactly who needs to be involved. So you don't need every single member of the team at every single meeting about this event. you might need a subset of that team. So maybe somebody from facilities, maybe the child care coordinator, and the event sponsor, to make sure that we have security figured out and we have child care in the right spot, or whatever the issue is. You don't need everybody involved at every meeting. Okay. You also need to make sure, and this would usually be the event planner, to document meeting minutes. So here's what we decided. Here's any questions that are still left outstanding that maybe we need the event sponsor to weigh in on. Here are action items that were assigned during the meeting, and here's who said they would do it, and here's when they said they would get it done. And you go put that in your task management system and assign those tasks and follow up with those people to make sure it gets done. So I don't know how many meetings I've sat in on. At the end of it, I asked, okay, who's doing what? And everyone looked at me with a blank look on their face. Okay?
Right.
You just got to make sure that the meeting isn't a waste of time. And you do that by ensuring that we know exactly what needs to be done and by whom and by when as a result of that discussion. Okay, so that's my soapbox. I'll get on about meetings for the day.
If you're going to have it, make it worthwhile, but no longer than it needs to be, and make sure it was productive.
Yeah, and I do what I call kind of guerrilla facilitating meetings, where everyone does this. I do it too. You start getting off on a little rabbit trail and talking about something that's kind of related but not really. And so when I'm facilitating a meeting, I tend to go, you know what, that's a great point. Let's table that for later. I'll write it down. We'll come back to it at another time, but we need to get back on track.
Right.
So that's a big role for the event planner.
All right.
And this is the longest part of the process. The next part of the process goes hand in hand during the execution phase, and this is monitoring and reporting progress. So I talked with an executive pastor the last month or so, and their church did a backpack outreach, so school supplies for local kids, right? And I can't remember the exact number, but I think they had a goal of like 500 backpacks that they were going to hand out. And he told me he didn't know, a couple of weeks leading up to the event, how many backpacks they actually had ready. He didn't know if it was 5 or 450. That's a big deal to not know how things are going. And so it makes leaders nervous, and understandably so. And when a leader gets nervous, naturally they tend to start micromanaging a little bit and coming in and asking a bunch of detailed questions, and which that's their prerogative, that's fine. But you can avoid getting a lot of those last minute, late night scared emails from your pastor or executive pastor by being proactive and giving them a regular update on how things are going with this event. So in order to do that, the event planner would need to gather those updates from team members each week. Hopefully everyone gets on board with updating Basecamp or Asana or whatever system you use. But usually you're going to have to kind of ping people and say, hey, don't forget to update your tasks so that you can get that information. And then the event planner would put together what I call, either an executive summary or a dashboard for that event. And this is another template that comes with my book. But it just shows kind of the key milestones that are coming up, what you worked on this week, what you have coming up next week, and then any issues that you might need the sponsor to weigh in on. And kind of a red, yellow, green light at the top. So red, Houston, we have a problem. Yellow, okay, things are a little rocky, but we're getting back on track. Or green, everything's good. Okay, so it just kind of lets that leader know where things are at. It's a one-pager. Within less than a minute, they can figure out if they need to ask some questions or if we're good to go. Okay. Next part of the process is to facilitate event day. So this is the big day that all this work has been leading up to. And for the event planner, there's 2 key things that I recommend. The first is to establish a command center. Now, what I have seen happen on event day is everyone on the team and probably most of the key volunteer leaders know who is in charge of coordinating the event overall. And everyone's looking for that one person to ask their 50 different questions. Okay? Needless to say, nobody can find him or her because that person is running around trying to help somebody else. What works a lot better is if you park the event planner in one spot the entire day. Okay? And so set up a table that's kind of out of the way, and everyone knows this is where the event planner is going to be. And the event planner maybe has a couple of runners with him that can go and troubleshoot issues, run errands, get stuff, that sort of thing. But that way, you know where to find the event planner, you know how to get a hold of that person, and whether it's a question from a vendor that's catering the event, whether it's a guest speaker that has a change to their slides, whatever it is, you go and get help at the command center.
Okay.
The second big thing for event day is to coordinate team check-in, making sure all volunteers and even staff members check in when they show up, an hour before the event, whatever the timing is. So they get their last minute instructions that they've already heard 2 or 3 times before because you did training ahead of time, but you're making sure they remember the morning of, and they go to their spot and they're ready when guests start arriving. And then I wish I could say you were done on event day, but you're not. There's a couple of things to do to put a nice neat bow on all of this. And that's what I call leading post-event activities. And so the first thing is to celebrate. Okay, you have busted it to do all of this work, all of the planning, coordinated everything as a team. Enjoy the fact that it was successful. Celebrate, how many people were helped through the outreach, or how many marriages were strengthened in a marriage conference, or the number of people that came up for prayer at the altar for salvation or for rededication, all of that kind of stuff. Celebrate those big moments that you enjoyed as a team and that God did in and through your church. Okay, it's so easy to run from one event to the next and not take time to reflect. Even if it's just 20, 30 minutes, take the time. And then also conduct a lessons learned session. So there are things that you will have experienced as planning this event, whether this is the first time you've hosted this type of event or the 10th time. But there are things that went extremely well that you want to make sure you repeat for this event next year or future events. And then there are, no matter how well you plan an event, there's stuff that's going to go wrong, right? Hopefully minor stuff, but there's stuff that you're going to want to improve on next round. And so this is a good time to just reflect on that. It's not pointing fingers or placing blame. It's just, hey, this is something I saw that happen, and here's how I think we could improve on it for future events. Okay. And then the last thing is to compile a planning notebook. This would include your plan, any documentation, contracts that you had with vendors, notes about vendors of, yep, use this guy again, or nope, don't use this company again, all of that kind of stuff, just so that the next time you host this particular event next year or something similar, you're not starting from a blank page. You can pull that exact same project plan out, copy it, paste it as a new one, and start changing the dates, and you've saved yourself hours of work the next time around. Okay? So that's the process. Oh, go ahead, Nathan. Did you have something?
I was going to say, as long as you remember to incorporate those lessons learned in the new plan.
And that's the thing, when you get ready to do that team kickoff meeting, I would recommend that the event planner go back, once you've started doing this, you go back and you look at that planning notebook from the last go round or the last few lessons learned meeting notes, and you bring some of that stuff up in the team kickoff meeting and say, hey, remember last year when we did this event and this happened? Here's what we said at the end after that event planning session or the lessons learned session that we would do differently. Let's make sure we take that into consideration as we're planning this one.
Awesome. Great.
So that's the process. That is what I have seen work really well in churches. It's something that I teach. I have a whole coaching program on this where I really come alongside a church and coach them through implementing this process. Kind of a 6-month deal where I really help them get going on it, making sure you take this and adapt it however is necessary to your specific church staff structure and culture. And then also obviously have the book that's available as well with a lot of templates and kind of walks you through that process. But at this point, I'd like to just open it up, Nathan, if we have any questions.
Yeah, so first one, we've talked a lot about project management software. I'm familiar with several, and you mentioned several. So the question is, what kind of features are the most valuable as churches might look at project management software? Mm-hmm. What should they focus more on, and what features are maybe not as helpful for them, uh, so that
Okay.
they don't get taken in by the flash. What do they?
Yeah.
What's really good for them?
One, I would make sure it's cloud based so that anyone on your all the staff members, key volunteers can log into it from wherever they're in, whatever internet browser they have, and can get access to it. So it's not software that they would have to have downloaded onto their computer. That's going to make it a lot easier to pull in volunteers that have time, on evenings and weekends to help with stuff. If it's cloud based, it's just a lot simpler that way.
Okay.
Another thing I would make sure it has the capability of is to put in tasks with, somebody assigned to the task, a due date. If you can also put in a start date, that's nice too. So you have a start and a finish date. So if they say it's going to take me 5 days to do it, you can plug that in. If it has the ability for you to put in a task dependency, so if you have task number 1 and task number 10, and task number 10 can't start until task number 1 is finished, it would be nice to be able to put that in. So I think Asana has that capability in its paid version. The ability to attach files or put notes into a task, that's going to be helpful. I, being a project management nerd, love a Gantt chart. But
That's what I was.
that is not absolutely necessary for your average project event plan. It's nice to have. Okay, but if you can
Well,
look at it on a calendar view, that's going to be good.
yeah, and I will say I'll throw out there because I'm like you. Gantt.
Mm-hmm.
Nice thing about a Gantt chart is you can do those in Excel.
Yeah.
And that's real good for getting the when this task starts and when it ends and how it affects
Mm-hmm.
everything in the future. And for those on the web call that have done construction before, a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us in the facilities have, we know exactly what a Gantt chart is because that's what the architects and everybody
Mm-hmm.
always used to pull out at the construction meetings to tell us why we were behind.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I've used Microsoft Project in my corporate job when I worked in the corporate world. You don't need that for this.
Right.
That would be overkill. An Asana, Basecamp, those would be my top 2 recommendations. Trello is nice when you're very visual, but to me, I just can't wrap my head around it because I can't see the task in sequential order.
Right.
So that's probably maybe my personal preference showing on that one.
Okay. And some people have asked, what is a Gantt chart and what does it look like? It's easy to search it. You can see examples, and there's examples available online and templates. When you search it, it's GANTT.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a Gantt chart for those that are asking about that. I would just recommend just Googling it, searching for it.
Yeah, it's kind
And
of
you
hard to
can find the
explain
templates.
without showing it.
Yeah, I didn't upload an example, but definitely they're easy to see. But these other programs like Monday.com and Asana and those,
Mm-hmm.
they're a little more familiar.
Yeah.
Would you agree kind of with what we're used to now as we see things that are server based and online and that we interact with?
They
Just the
are.
way
And the biggest thing is most of these companies provide a free trial. And it's probably maybe not the full breadth of all the options that they have in their software, but they'll usually provide a pretty robust version that's a free, like 30-day trial or something. Do that first before you buy anything or you sign up for one, and have maybe 2 or 3 people on your staff use it with you. And kick the tires a bit, test it out, see if you like it, see if it's user friendly, do that before you invest a whole lot of time training everyone on staff on how to use it and trying to implement it, because you might find that just as a general rule, your staff really loves tool A and hates tool B. Maybe it's just not the look and feel doesn't resonate with them or whatever. But yeah, go ahead and do kind of a free trial, roll it out to just a handful of people, test it out, see how it goes, and then if it's a big hit, then roll it out to the rest of the team.
Okay. We had a follow-up question on the developing the fan plays
Mm-hmm.
and plan phase. I'll get this
Okay.
right. Uh, who are the people that you go to review some of the tasks if you haven't assembled the team yet? Are you
Yeah,
are you
those
just
those parts of the project or the process kind of have to go hand in hand.
Okay.
So you're probably going to know who on, like, let's say the head of the marketing department. If I'm trying to figure out all the tasks that are necessary to promote this event, I'm going to go to that person first and say, hey, we have this event coming up. Um, do you want to be the point of contact and on the team for planning this event, or is there someone on your team that you want in your department you want to assign to this, and if so, who? And then go about it that way. But yeah, you kind of are doing those at the same time because you have to develop the plan so you can review it in the team kickoff meeting, but you need to talk to the people that are on the team before you can develop the plan. So yeah, it's a little.
It happens concurrently.
Yeah.
You have to. So just like you said, when we're developing it, we're not developing it in a vacuum. We are getting input from our team, but they're going to help us define then the specific ones to ask when it comes time to having that kickoff meeting. So like you said, we don't necessarily need the senior pastor in a meeting for a kickoff on an event. They may have designated somebody else. And that makes more sense. So that makes sense. So we're doing it concurrently, if you will. So that answered that question. We've got a few more minutes here. We keep it at about an hour. Is there any other additional questions, or do we need to expound on any of the other questions that we've answered so far? While I'm waiting for some folks, if they want to type, I just want to remind you that the links to the book that we've been discussing are on CFMS and the resources. So right there's a little description, and we have a hot link that'll take you directly to velocityministrymanagement.com, which is where you can see the event planning toolkit as well as all of the other things that Deborah does and what she's got going on there. So I encourage you all to check out that link, check out what's available there, and take advantage of the experience and what it takes to be proactive in what we do, and so we're more intentional, which makes us more efficient and more effective. So we do have another question that came in. Is there a difference in this planning process for weekly or monthly events versus a single event? Is it scalable for repetitiveness, if you will?
I would think so. I think you need to scale it way down and shorten the runway for this, especially when you've got an event, maybe you're doing it every single month. You would want to take that same project plan and make it something where you can just copy paste month over month and just change the dates. Save yourself a lot of time there. It is more focused on the bigger events, or the events that you're doing once a quarter or once a year. But yeah, I do think you could scale it down to something that you're doing month over month.
So maybe just develop the plan initially to make sure what we're doing in a series consistently is good. And then after every week or every event, do a brief after action and say, okay, do we need to tweak? Is it still running great? If so, good. Let's continue. If not, let's adjust. That'd be fair?
You're really compressing the process for something that's on that short of a time frame between events.
And then maybe review it, thinking of churches, faith-based organizations, maybe review it annually to make sure, is this match what we're doing this coming year?
Yeah, make sure it still aligns with your overall mission and vision.
Okay. Any advice for working with micromanagers?
The biggest thing, one, is get out in front of them. So providing that weekly executive summary or dashboard is going to be a big help, because they're going to get that. And the reason most people micromanage is because they are anxious. They are concerned that things aren't going well, that they haven't heard anything. And so in the absence of hearing anything at all, they think the worst. Okay. So to get out in front of that, you need to give them some information and be proactive and letting them know, hey, we've set this goal for 500 backpacks. The event is in 3 months, and we have 250 backpacks already set, and we have this plan in place to get the other 250. Giving them that kind of information is going to lower their blood pressure a bit, help them calm down, and then they're going to go focus on the issue that really needs their attention somewhere else. Okay.
Right. And so you need that information anyway. So just giving it to them in advance is a way to, just like you said, limit it and take their, hopefully, hopefully take the
Yeah.
pressure off.
And honestly, it's being respectful of them too. I mean, because if this is your senior pastor and executive pastor, they are overseeing a ton of stuff. It's, this event, it's, 10 different other ones. It's, an issue that's come up with the elder board. It's, you know, donation tithes are down this month, whatever the issue is. They've got a lot of stuff that's on their radar. And if you are being proactive and giving them regular updates and letting them know when you need them to get involved versus, hey, everything's good, here's what the status is, let us know if you have any questions, that's honoring them and helping them in their leadership role by knowing, okay, so-and-so, this event plan over here, she's got it covered. We're good. I can go focus on this other concern that's come up.
All right. Okay. And looking at event planning and some of these larger events, is there a sweet spot? The question is, sweet spot for how far in advance, or is there a way that we kind of, or a model or template that we'd use to say, okay, this type of event or this size, we plan at least this far out, or how would you go about developing those?
The first thing I would do is, if your church doesn't already do this, have an annual meeting, and you might be able to do this at the same time as you're doing your annual budget, and you plot out every single event that you're going to do over the next 12 months. You put it on the calendar. That doesn't mean you have to start planning it tomorrow, but you get that on the calendar so everybody on staff knows, here's what's coming up the next 12 months.
Okay.
That's the first big thing, because when you do that, you're going to see, oh, we've put 5 really big events in a 3-month time frame. Do we really want to do that to ourselves?
Right.
Does that make sense as a reuse of our time and resources? And is our congregation going to get burned out? It'll help you think through that. Once you have that figured out, the next thing I would do is consider, are you trying to get a guest speaker for a particular event? Especially if that person is in high demand. You probably need to plan that event a year out, because you need to be able to make sure you can get them scheduled. Okay.
Right.
Anything short of that, I would recommend, ideally, start planning 6 months ahead, because 1, you want to make sure you've got facility reserved. 2, from a communication standpoint, the communications team is going to need time to create logo and graphics, create the web page, create promotional videos, schedule when they're going to do announcements. From a volunteer perspective, you need to be able to respect your volunteers' time and get on their schedule early. And not ask them 2 weeks before the event, hey, can you be here all day Friday and Saturday? Right? So 6 months, I use that as a good rule of thumb. Sometimes you can get away with 3 months on a much smaller event, but I would do a minimum of 6 months if you can.
Okay. All right. Well, I think we are running up right at the top of the hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I appreciate your time, Deborah, with us today and the information that you have shared. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And for all those that have been with us, thank you. If there's any other follow-ups or any additional questions that you just didn't get a chance to ask, feel free to reach us at cfms@coolsolutionsgroup.com. That's cfms@coolsolutionsgroup.com. We'll be glad to answer any questions that come in through there, and we'll get Deborah to answer anything that came up from this webinar. Check out the resources page. There's the link there to velocityministrymanagement.com. Lots of things there. And we will make the recording of this webinar available as well as on our resources page. So we thank you all for attending and listening. And Deborah, again, thank you very much for your insight and your instruction on event management, because that's something we all do, and we all need to, and we all can do it better. So thank you for that.
My pleasure. And honestly, it's all about just helping ministry. I mean, there's a lot of logistics involved in this, but at the end of the day, it's about serving people and serving God as we're doing that. So
Amen.
I know I talk a lot of
Amen.
businessy logistics, but that's my heart behind all of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The better we do this, the more emphasis is on the mission.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you all very much. And thank you again, Deborah. And we will see you next month where, if you care to join us, we'll have Mr. Tim Cool speaking with us regarding our facilities and being intentional and proactive with a lot of what we do for life cycle and things in that nature. So we look forward to it for next month. We thank you again, and I pray that you all have a blessed rest of the week until we meet again. Thank you all, and have a great day.